So, Colin, last night you showed me a really wonderful movie. You showed me Stranger Than Fiction and went right on ahead and blew whatever I have for this episode out of the fucking water. Thank you very much for that.
That was the plan. I'm a tactical man. I work in things like this.
You see, Colin has a million things that he wants to do for the list, and all of them are great and wonderful or horrific and terrible. And this one just never fit, and he decided he was going to show it to me, and it was absolutely lovely. You said something very specific about it last night. How it is to Will Ferrell as like Punch Drunk Love is to Adam Sandler.
Yes. Stranger Than Fiction is a movie. We're just going to talk about this real quick for the cold open because I want to do this for an episode, but I have all of this year's, the remainder of it planned out for my choices and all of next year's. And I figure I'm going to keep putting this one off. This was actually a previous list episode that I did with Spencer that never came out way back when. This is my favorite Will Ferrell performance. This kind of was my definition of what a Will Ferrell movie was when I was a kid. This and Elf were kind of the two standards. And I love Anchorman and Anchorman 2 specifically. I want to rewatch all of his Bush era stuff and kind of get a better hankering for that. But for me as a kid, the thing that really defined sort of the childlike chaos that Will Ferrell had behind that was empathy. And empathy is at the very heart of this movie. And in the same way that I love Adam Sandler for a lot of his more empathetic performances, this really gets to the heart of kind of what it's like to sort of see a normal man who goes through his everyday life trying to figure out what it means to not just, in the words of Wall-E, survive but live. And how that makes him a better person in the long run. And it's very not only sweet, but just, it's important, I would argue.
It's very punk rock, despite its aesthetic, I guess.
Yeah, it looks like a Weezer album, so technically it's pop punk.
Yeah.
It's the aesthetic about the mid 2000s that I really like. It's shot on like 35 millimeter, but looks like an Apple commercial almost, I think is the best kind of description for it. And it's about a guy who works for the IRS. So, but it's a rom-com with him and Maggie Gyllenhaal, and it's not just cute, but it's fucking beautiful.
And just so happens, I feel, to pair really nicely with the film we might be watching today.
Awesome.
You've never seen it.
I've never seen it.
Oh my.
It is fourth week of Berga.
8th episode in total.
yes.
We are well over the halfway point.
We are down to the good bits of the burger. Right?
The truly American bits with the what I assume would probably be American cheese, if not for the holes on the top.
I think these two bits are the most heavily subsidized by the United States government. So
yes, red meat and dairy. It's what got me to be the man I am today.
That's so mean. Cheese. Here is your slice of American cheese. Very American. Don't worry about what's inside.
Yeah. Cheese. I am lactose intolerant, but I will shit my brains out on the daily. So we'll see if this is just as bad for me. And I'm sure, as you said, American. There's nothing.
Definitely no weed garbage in there.
No,
definitely not.
No.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, Jet Set Radio?
The movie for today is Dead Leaves. Everybody.
I have, as usual with his shit, no fucking clue what this is. And that's fine. That is completely okay. This is filthy.
Oh yeah.
This is
degenerate a little bit.
Filthy. Which is fine. You are giving me a DVD copy, and we're totally not going to stream this.
Yes.
In higher quality at all. No, we're watching. We are going back to my house
to watch the like 480p
on my
DVD
4K
copy.
TV.
It's 4K. TV. I want to chew on the pixels. All right. Look.
Okay.
So, early 2000s, right?
Yes.
Studio IG is looking for new talent to create a smaller side project to kind of run up alongside their bigger budget anime movie that's coming up here around 2004. They get a pitch from a guy called Imatoons. So he's an artist, animator from like the mid 90s into the early 2000s. He was really famous for fusing 1990s Japanese futurism with like graffiti and American comic book style art. He had a pretty decent log of work in like commercial stuff. So he did stuff for CC Lemon, which is like big name brand drink. He did that. He worked with Sega, notably, promoting the Saturn with a series of short comics called Future Buster, Pandy, and Retro. The stars of what would become Dead Leaves. They hired out a man named Hiroyuki Imiyashi, who broke into the animation industry like straight out of college. He got into Evangelion, like first.
Okay.
Yeah. Doing like in-betweens. So the very, very base of animation for Evangelion.
Yeah, but it's low-key the most important part. It's like being a fucking bass player.
Yeah,
it's
like,
just the animation part of animation.
Just all the hard parts people don't really like. He moved on from that. He did a couple like short series. He worked notably on FLCL. It's Fooly Cooly. He animated, storyboarded, and in part directed 2 of the episodes for that.
Is Fooly Cooly that one show that we watched that you're
Yes,
like, it's my childhood, and then we get like 2 minutes in and I'm like,
Yes,
we were like 17.
Yes, it was that one. It was filthy.
And it was filthy within 2 minutes, and then you're just sitting there red-faced, and I'm sitting there being like, what the fuck, Japan? I don't...
He's well known for his high energy, like smear heavy animation style.
Sick.
And his experimental work in direction. He did a lot of stuff where animation would just break down into like a manga that's just fucking on screen. Or I think for one of the shows he did, they had to, due to like budgetary constraints, use cardboard cutouts and paper cutouts for it.
That creates the best shit sometimes.
Yeah, cut to noodle these days.
Cut to Jaws. The entirety of fucking Jaws. The shark doesn't work, so we'll make the movie fucking scarier.
All right, so the plan, right, is a short film fusing their 2 art styles. The simplicity of Hiroyuki's with like the American kind of graphic art style of Imatoons, right? Directed in full by Imiyashi, using the characters from that old Sega comic. And with a bunch of animators, sound designers that the 2 of them had fucking met as they worked in the industry. So they handpicked all these guys that weren't like names on the tin, sort of, you know, really high accredited people, but that they knew were good.
They're the people that work their asses off and don't get any of the credit regardless.
Short, crass, and over-the-wall crazy was the name of the game, and that was to contradict with the realistic and more serious tone of Ghost in the Shell 2, that movie everyone remembers and cares about. That sequel that everyone remembered needing to happen.
And that movie that everyone loves and we totally love too. We're not controversial on anything.
What you are watching is a single image zooming in for literally 2 minutes.
And a mouth slowly...
I don't even think there was a mouth.
No, that's right. They cut to like the other person while the other person... You know, we're not going to get into Ghost in the Shell. We don't want to make people in the comments mad right now.
Little did production IG know that this would be like the catalyst for the formation of Studio Trigger. Lots of the guys that made this movie would move on to start that studio. And they are known for Kill la Kill, Little Witch Academia, Star Wars Visions, Cyberpunk Edge Runners.
They're so all the new shit that everyone's like losing their fucking minds over.
All of the like anime that everyone likes.
Yeah.
So they're those guys. No, really great fucking music by Yoshihiro Aike and sound design by Fusanobu Fujiyama. Fujiyama, Jesus.
It's all good.
I'm trying, fam. English dub, which we're watching, is The MCs are played by Amanda Windley and her husband, Jackson Lee.
Sick.
A power couple that they end up working on a lot of the same stuff together. I think they worked on some of the Evangelion movies.
Oh, and I see this by the case. This has one of your favorite tropes of man with TV head.
Yes. Okay. One of my item head and object head people are peak character design. Okay. Do you know anything about Studio Trigger or any of the guys I mentioned?
No, but I'll say this just from like the art on the case. I dig this because this has an indie comic vibe from the 90s, which you all may not really realize. I'm a comic guy. I really, really, really love comic books, and until I want to say a couple years ago, I was like the 90s was the shit era, and that's when like you kind of just look at the big two and the offerings they were putting out. I didn't start getting into 90s indie books until recently, and even like the 90s indie books that were from the main two, like Vertigo, all of Morrison's stuff from Vertigo. It's not necessarily the art style, but sort of like this has like an Eastman and Laird look to like the line work and the heavy inking on the line work.
Heavily inspired by like 1990s comics and stuff like that. Oh, by the way, it's very short. It's less than an hour.
Fuck yeah.
So
dope.
So it's on YouTube, guys. Just go watch it.
Oh, yeah.
Just come along with us. Let's have a good old time with Dead Leaves.
Hey, showtime.
Activity has been detected. Police units will arrive in 1 minute. Avoid contact.
We, the people, who are dedicated to protecting the common good, do hereby charge you with trespassing, theft, violence, assault, illegal possession of firearms, and a really crappy attitude. You are therefore sentenced to life imprisonment in the DL Correctional Facility on the moon.
You crap too much!
So Colin, what did you think of Dead Leaves?
Before I say what I say, I want to iterate, I don't mean this as an insult. This feels like a unaired pilot, more so than a film. First question, before I guess I really get into like my thoughts, how close is this if you are aware to the comic that it's based off of?
The comic is literally very short. It's just the two characters would show up and blow some shit up, and they would advertise Sega games to you. So there's not a ton of substance to the old comics. They're really like advertisements. Maybe there's like an overarching like something going on over the whole thing, but I don't remember.
I guess what I was asking is like, is there any of this story that is like a direct adaptation of the books?
No.
Okay, gotcha. It's super weird because like I said, this feels like a pilot because it feels like a lot of setup for something that doesn't happen. And for something that I feel like could feel really hollow and stale after about 10 minutes because there is no real plot or story driving anything that goes on. I think what makes it work, and this is something I will rarely give a pass to anything on, is the pure passion, charisma, and energy that you can feel behind the people making it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, they set out and said, listen, it's the same sort of thing that I think they did with like Fooly Cooly, FLCL, except instead of this being like a 6-episode long thing that takes like 3 hours or however long that whole series takes, it's a 50-minute like special, basically. It's introducing these characters, introducing their world, and kind of like fucking saying, hey, let's give people just enough of a story so that they can like set something up for themselves and see what they think the movie's, saying about nothing.
Yeah.
I think they did it to fucking show off their animation chops.
Yeah.
To like maybe set up something for these two characters I mean, this is the only movie that they're in, so
Yeah.
nah. It would be cool. It would have been a really great special for like a series, you know.
Yeah, but simultaneously, I don't need that. I feel like I kind of got all
Nah.
I wanted from this. And with that, you brought up something that I find really interesting, and I guess kind of ties into like what I think about this. You brought up one of their main inspirations as far as art goes is 90s comic book art in America. So, if we're going to circle back, not just with like talking about something from the beginning of the episode, but I'll circle back to the very beginning of this show. First episode, we talked about RoboCop. And one of the big things I brought up in that was Dark Knight Returns and Frank Miller as an artist. Frank Miller is a weeb. One of his first comics, I believe the title was just Ronin, if I remember correctly. But he was like a early 20s, just weeaboo guy who liked samurai shit.
Yeah.
And apparently Ronin's really good, and I really want to read it. But if you look at a lot of his art, it's very clearly influenced by manga at the time, but kind of extremified to this huge example. You know, you can look at 300, you can look at Ronin, you can look at Dark Knight Returns, all of his 80s stuff. Then you move over towards what the 90s became with the indie scene, which this is very much is like trying to capture. And this movie looks more like a Japanese interpretation of an American either indie comic or a 90s image comic. So with that, you sort of have this like folding layer or like levels of inspiration, which is what happens with film in general, where the East is inspired by the West or the West is inspired by the East, and eventually that like snake chasing its own tail just circles back on each other, because you wouldn't have gotten the influence of 90s comics without the influence of the Western stuff being influenced by the Eastern stuff in the first place.
Oh yeah, no. By the time that like, especially before like the internet was like massive and everyone was on it all the time, you know, a decade's worth of stuff would just show up on one coast, and then a decade's worth of that stuff would show up on the other coast, and it would just fucking feedback loop into each other.
Yeah.
So basically, what Dead Leaves is an animated version of like 90s indie comics that is just ramped up as high as possible.
And with that, like one of the things that I find so fascinating is I brought up Image. I'm not huge into Image as what it started out as. What it eventually became, stuff like Invincible, Walking Dead. Basically, when Robert Kirkman started working for Image is when it got good. I don't like the Invincible show. The book is... They're better. I've read all of them. But like with that, you started integrating stories, and weirdly enough, in this like attempt for Todd McFarlane as a creator to sort of try and make something separate from Marvel and DC that was doing its own thing and doing separate stories, it took integrating old school Marvel concepts back into what Image was doing for it to start to be, it was successful before, but something that felt profitable due to its own stories, which is what Invincible is.
Yeah.
And with that, like, you're sort of just getting this weird fold, fold over to where I don't know how many people, like, when this was out, who ended up working on, like, American action cartoons that we grew up with that were very clearly anime influenced, watched this and were, like, heavily influenced on this. But something like Teen Titans, Ben 10, all that kind of stuff, very much from just, like, a visual standpoint, not as much the animation department.
Invader Zim a lot as well.
Yeah, which, no, because Invader Zim, that's just the guy's art style, and he started out as a 90s comic artist.
That's true.
So...
So it's the other way around.
Yeah, no, it's...
If you see the many weird-looking fellas in this movie, those strange-looking clones, then you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about.
Which, Brazil is eventually going to be a list movie. Brazil is my third favorite movie of all time. It goes right behind Night of the Hunter and then Saturday Night Fever. The whole concept of, like, prisoners being held up in chains, attached to, like, full-body straitjackets and everything, is from Brazil, and I don't know if Terry Gilliam was pulling anything from that, because it's his distorted dystopian version of, more sci-fi dystopian version of 1984.
Yeah.
But all that is taken from, like, that shit, and I don't know, a lot of the stuff that I really like about this movie really does come down to the fact that it feels like shit I can't even describe. It's because it's such a visually based piece of entertainment, to the point where the stuff that ends up being large exposition scenes, it doesn't feel like something I can get mad about as much, because it feels like the people making the movie wanted to get it out of the way as much as the people watching it do.
The large exposition scenes are like 30 seconds a piece, and there's like 4 of them.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is just to create imagery, so that they can create some visual imagery, so that they can tie things along nicely into this little thing. I don't think they were going for anything in specific. Like the facility is called Dead Leaves, and the moon is all chewed up, and it looks like a dead leaf. And I think they just wanted to be like pseudo-intellectual in that way, and just let you find a little something, like a connection there.
Even if it doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Like, they went very base level with a lot of that stuff,
which I'm fine with. I don't really have an
just
issue with
enough
that.
to string you along and let you find your own way through it, I guess. So that being said, visuals are awesome, amazing, outright. So I made a couple points, like they're single frames, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll cut back to like single frames, and the way I think that this is different from another piece of media that I'm not a big fan of, Ghost in the Shell. When they do single frame little cut-ins or pull-outs on shots, and it's just the one frame, usually they cut back and forth between something very, very quickly to like build up an emotion, or to like build up a joke, or like a very specific feeling. It has like purpose, whereas with Ghost in the Shell, it kind of just felt like they ran out of budget. And either they ran out of budget, or they just really didn't care.
Yeah.
There's a scene in the elevator. Characters are talking, and they have the static image of the interior, and it's jostling up and down to say, hey, they are in an elevator, and they talk about something that they just showed you for like 3 minutes, right?
Yeah. No, it's the big anime kind of cliche that we've complained about. Or I've bitched about, I should say, in a couple episodes that more so annoys me. And I don't know. I want to rewatch Ghost in the Shell myself, because we both watched it with each other for the first time. And I could not shut up when pausing it and talking about, like, this is, like,
It was
lazy.
it was so bad.
And once again, I don't want to shit on the people who worked on it, I guess is the big
there
thing.
are some very great shots.
Yeah.
All the ones for the trailers are very well animated. And then that's basically it.
Yeah.
So in anime, the big problem is a lot of times they have to cut costs. And to do so, they'll do the whole like single frame or just like a couple mouth flaps, sort of like whatever. And that's all just to cut costs, and they do it because whatever, we want to make the rest of the film look good and, and animate nicely and be all pretty. But Dead Leaves says if we have to do that, and if we're going to do that, it's going to be part of the joke.
Well,
And they maximize what they have to make single frames or silly little like lip flapping 2-frame animations and stuff.
and also, like, if we're talking about something like that, I think the important thing to also bring up is Ghost in the Shell, if it's not 2 hours, it's 90 minutes, but it's actually feature length. And in my opinion, it's too long. And the big thing that you have to remember is, like, you can give some excuses like, oh, it's for the sake of a joke or like whatever. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter as much, because you're watching something that's literally 59 minutes. So much is happening so fast that a couple seconds worth of like low animation dialogue or exposition that, to be frank, it is bad and sloppy and not really all that great. It doesn't stand out as much to me. Now, you answered my question that I guess I was going to ask earlier, which is I was going to ask, like, in how much of this was based off the comic. I was going to ask if any of this was taken directly from the comic. How much of this do you think was like reused drawings?
So basically, the comic, the original, was a lot more detail oriented because it's that's kind of the style that the creator had in mind. And when they teamed up together for this one, they streamlined everything so that animation would be faster and easier and more like clear. And because they were really leaning heavily into like frame cutting and smear animation.
And to be frank, listen, in extremely stylized stuff, detail is not necessarily something that's going to make your art better. A lot of times making stuff simple will make it better in itself. Like a lot of times making something overly detailed when it's extremely stylized is off-putting and makes it worse.
Oh yeah.
This is very subjective, and this has just kind of been my opinion as someone, once again, who's read comics. You know, when I look at this, the only reason I ask is because I made a comment right when we started watching it, like, okay, this is a motion comic, basically, before it got to all the action stuff. And that's like the best way I could describe a lot of like the dialogue scenes. Is they're doing the Ghost in the Shell thing. The difference is, as you described with that Ghost in the Shell thing, it's like 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
As opposed to what this movie does, which is, it's like a block of text just telling you, this is your backstory. Yeah. Here we go, and then they move on with that. But the difference is, when they cut between imagery of trying to like show visuals that go along with like the exposition of what they're explaining, it's a bunch of crop and pans over fairly low resolution scans of pieces of artwork. So instead of doing like a dolly in and out in like the old Disney way, which Disney, if you don't know, invented this method called multi-plane animation, where instead of doing a fake dolly where they just zoom in or zoom out on the piece of art, they had like 4 or 5 pieces of glass with different like like frames of animation going between them, and all the pieces along with the camera would slowly move, so the focal point became different. And obviously I don't have the budget for something like that, and I'm going to assume even if this is hand drawn, it's digitally animated, not cell animated.
I think it's all digitally drawn, digitally animated.
No. And
it's 2004, so that was the thing to do.
Yeah, no, and for that, it all looks fucking great. That's not an issue. And I guess, like, I don't know, it's like if we're going to compare this to like Ghost in the Shell, I think the thing that like makes a lot of the same problems that this movie has, because they do have a lot of similar problems, is it doesn't linger. For 9 seconds, nothing lingers in this movie. And while I don't think a lot of this movie's humor is for me, and a lot of it probably by a few people could be considered a bit much, it's also not something where I can get mad at it, because like with that, it's a movie that throws 1,000 jokes at the wall, and whatever doesn't stick doesn't matter. You're moving on from that already. I started out not being annoyed by like the drill penis joke.
Drill dick.
Yeah,
credited in the credits as drill dick.
Yeah. But after like the second or third time, I'm like, okay, we're getting like rid of this dumb joke. Then he says a funny line, and then he dies.
They take the character joke as far as they can take it, and then let him die.
Yeah, no. And there are no precious characters in this movie, which I also appreciate. If anything, I know why they didn't kill TV Man, but like the fact that his head gets ripped off, I'm like, okay, cool. Nothing is absolutely precious in this, and that's dope as shit. And with like talking about all that stuff, I really find interesting. I do want to just talk about like the art for a second. I don't know if Tartakovsky watched a lot of this, but like,
if I'm right, the dude's a bit of a weeb.
Yeah.
If I'm right, he said something about that.
Because Tartakovsky's style, I don't even want to say like, oh, it's like all over this. It almost just feels like directly plagiarized, which I don't have a problem with that. That's completely fine. But it's so bizarre to see something that both feels influenced by this era of Cartoon Network while also feeling like what later went on
To influence that same...
Yeah.
I mean, you know, things aren't static. I'm sure they were influenced by like American cartoons a bit, and then American cartoons were like, that's fucking sick. Look what they're doing with digital.
When did Alita Battle Angel come out?
Alita Battle Angel. Oh, geez. The movie?
The book, the manga.
Oh, I think that's like late 90s. I'm not quite sure. We'll put it up here. I'll text it to Colin or something.
Because like the design of the chick who... There's even really like a main bad guy in this, but like the main chick that she's fighting off against at the end with the fucking arms and shit. That looks like something out of that book.
Yeah. Like
almost fucking directly. Now granted, I haven't read it because...
I watched the movie and it's all right. It's not as good as the fucking book is. But yeah, no, the design's great. It's fucking iconic. All these designs, and like you said, they don't really like linger on any character too long. Like no one's precious. As soon as like this funny looking guy is no longer funny, and they can't do any more sight gags with his character or whatever, they just all right, you get shredded now. you're getting like blown up with like a million rockets. Goodbye, see ya.
No, and like I said, I'm sure like it's weird. A lot of the humor in this movie could probably be considered by some people, it's a little fucked.
It is.
That's not okay. I don't know. I am someone who, in my limited experience of Lupin that I've watched, my favorite one is Mystery of Mamo, which, if you've seen it, you get why that's maybe a little not kosher. But I don't know. It's like, I feel awful because like as far as like themes, I don't really have much to say because the movie's not really about anything.
Don't think I ever wanted to be.
No,
I don't think I ever fucking wanted to be.
And that's completely okay. I don't have a problem with that. What's something that you really like that's like a standout to you in this movie? If you could pick like a specific thing.
Like a specific thing. I mean, I could talk about the music. Yeah. The music is fucking, oh my god, it's so fucking good, guys. It's techno, it's classical, it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Just like all the jokes, as soon as something is not servicing the mood and the fucking scene, they just fucking ramp right up into something else. Yeah. And they'll pull it right back as soon as they really need to. I love it. I wish I could rip it from this movie. Yeah. I'm not sure they sell it anywhere.
How did you find this, out of curiosity?
How did I when you're a weeb, sometimes you find just weird GIFs to explain like whatever on like Twitter or whatever. Yeah. Or even before this, like on YouTube or whatever. Yeah. AMVs, top 10 whatever lists. It'll be some like the craziest animation, and they'll just find it.
But do you remember like the specific like first time you watched it?
The first thing of this that I watched was the scene where they steal the car in the very beginning. Yeah. And I remember specifically that shot of Pandy where she like punches the fucking robot and then gets up and does like a 17 times flip before kicking it into nothing. And I said, that is the sickest fucking thing I've ever seen. There's actually, during that whole wave where people were like doing like frame by frame interpolation, and they were like, yo, we can improve your movie by adding it to 60 frames per second. If I can find the two GIFs, we'll put them right here. Fucking it just mangles what would otherwise be so like every frame is intentional. And then some people are like, no, I like it when it smears into a mess of literally nothing.
Not understanding that like animation smears where there are less frames are intentionally there to make it look like the motion is smoother, so trying to artificially interpret that with AI.
And these AIs don't understand that the artistic intent behind like each individual like smear mark. Like, and so it just becomes a big blobby mess of nothing. And people are like, no, but it's cool.
Okay, but like, I guess like my question then is like, okay, you talked about like anime forums or whatever. Like, that is something I have so little experience with. Yeah. And everything like, culturally, was it like a thing where you found this and it was sort of like a?
It's kind of like a cult hit because it did release here in the US, but I think it only ever came straight to DVD. Yeah. And that was basically it. So in weeb circles, people would just like buy whatever. And when people found it, or like when they found it on Japanese forums or got like bits and pieces sent to them across like the internet or like whatever, they would be right on it. And so you'd be very quick to find like spaces of people that are like super into like these very specific movies that otherwise you probably wouldn't see.
Well, and I appreciate you for that, because as much as I feel like I'm not really adding much commentary to besides it's good, I appreciate you showing me stuff like this, because I think I brought this up on the show. I've been watching every Disney movie in chronological order, the Walt Disney's Animation Studios ones, which is different from the Toon Disney, which is their TV division, does stuff like Goofy Movie and like spin-offs and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's like it's heightened my love that I already had for like Western animation. And I've brought up to you just a bunch of times how like my big thing with like a lot of Eastern animation and how like a lot of times it's either an adaptation or a reinterpretation on something else, which, you know, Disney does that a lot, but it feels like it's lacking a lot of soul. That's why I gravitate towards something like Akira or any of the Lupin movies that I've liked.
Yeah.
And with that, it's like, I feel like I don't have much to say about it, but I get the same sort of feeling of someone putting all their heart and soul into something that ends up being under an hour, but you see every piece of like blood, sweat, and tears on here. And it's not something like where I'm watching it in Metropolis and it feels like it doesn't add up towards something. Yeah. I enjoy it every second, and I never was bored or anything like that.
All the people who made this movie, I don't think knew or really thought like, hey, this is gonna go somewhere.
No.
They thought we're gonna make this movie. That's the most important thing right now. If you're making good art, usually the idea is what I'm making right now is the most important thing to me, and I'm gonna make it the most important thing to everybody else that I can do. You know? And then as soon as it's over, you move on, you find the next most important thing.
And that, at the end of the day, I think is really what good art should be. So thank you so much for showing me this, Tony.
No problem.
I really appreciate it. This is probably my favorite thing you've shown me on this show so far.
Fuck yes.
So
Nice.
thank you. All right, guys. If you watch this, what did you think of it? If you haven't, go find it somewhere online. You can buy it on YouTube. Did you say someone did like a rip of it somewhere?
I'm sure there's rips floating around.
Yeah, but,
and I think it's on like it's on one of those other anime streaming websites.
Yes. And go
Find it, just watch it.
Yeah, just
go.
fucking pay for it. It's really good.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Tony and I have some important business to attend to off camera. It's actually kind of, you guys don't need to hear about that. Thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, have a nice day, guys.
Chef. Chef. God.
You said chef the first time. Okay. So, I understand the message that I sent you this morning before we went to go work on the ship engine was a bit much, but it's serious. They're coming.
I mean,
they discovered the corpse on C-SPAN last week. It's outed to the public.
I mean, but nobody fucking believes that shit.
No,
Nobody
that's the
believes that
insane
shit.
part, is that no one believes it, but then you go and people are making memes about it. Oh, my alien, when I find my alien and I show them music. Do they not understand how fucking offensive that is? We've talked about, you have like a wife and kids at home.
Are they really gonna fucking the whole planet?
The whole planet.
If we got the
Wait, shit, your mic's still on.
Jesus fucking Christ.